Good evening, and welcome. I'm Matthew Swanson, the Associate Director of Choruses for the Cincinnati May Festival. You join me here on the stage of Springer Auditorium in Cincinnati's historic Music Hall, which opened to a crowd of thousands at the 1878 May Festival. The May Festival is the nation's oldest music festival, and it has been a springtime fixture in Cincinnati since 1873. This year, however, like so many other treasured cultural events, the May Festival could not be held as planned in order to protect the health and welfare of our musicians, our staff, and you, our loyal audience. Even so, in the midst of this pandemic, the May Festival is determined to celebrate the human voice and the singing spirit of Cincinnati, the same spirit that fills this hall every spring, and the spirit that is found in the streets and avenues of our city all year long. We have several exciting events planned during our online May Festival, and we hope you'll join us for those yet to come. I share greetings tonight from Juanjo Mena, the principal conductor of the May Festival. From his home in the Basque region of Spain, Juanjo extends his warmest wishes to all of you, and he writes the following. Good evening to you all, and thank you for joining this, the first of our live events during what should have been my third Cincinnati May Festival as principal conductor. I can't tell you how disappointed I am not to be in Cincinnati now. At this moment, I should be setting off from my hotel, ready for tonight's final rehearsal for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and for Jessie Montgomery's I Have Something to Say. It wasn't meant to be. But I would like to extend my very warm virtual welcome to Jessie and my thanks to her for agreeing to take part in this event. Thanks also to Christopher Eanes, Executive Director of the Cathedral Choral Society in Washington, D.C., the co-commissioners of this fine new work. You are both very welcome here. I look forward to viewing what will, I'm sure, be a very enjoyable event. Please stay safe until we meet again. Juanjo Mena. We welcome the opportunity to engage with you virtually this evening. Throughout tonight's live stream, we encourage you to submit questions through the chat window, and we'll ask them of our guests in the final segment of our program. Now to the music. The 2020 May Festival would have brought to life an extraordinary array of music, much of it new to the May Festival and to Cincinnati. A particular highlight was to be the opening night performance of a new work for chorus and orchestra from composer, violinist, and educator Jessie Montgomery, scheduled for tomorrow evening, May 22nd. Though we could not bring this new work to life, we are very honored to bring the composer to you from her home in New York. Please join me in welcoming Jessie Montgomery. Jessie, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you. I'm glad I could be here in some way, in this way.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
How are you doing in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think I'm, in a large sense, we're sort of all in the same boat. I'm just sort of trying to get, sort of find what a new rhythm, for being creative and for working and staying in touch with friends and, adjusting to being at home and not flying all around the country and around the world playing concerts. It's been, of course, a big change, and I miss not being able to be there in Cincinnati. I was excited about the project. I also love Cincinnati. I always love an opportunity to visit. It's such a great town. So,
well, we will certainly have to have you back in the very near future.
Yes.
Composing itself is often a bit of a solitary act. So has this changed the nature of your compositional work?
It's changed it mainly in the way that I have now I compose in the same place every time rather than in hotel rooms or sort of on the fly. It's been nice to sort of just have my place where I work, and I go there every time I need to sort of hunker down. And having that just regular relationship with my workspace has been really special, actually. So I've enjoyed that a lot. Yeah.
Good. I
Hmm.
understand you're a lifelong New Yorker. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about growing up in New York and how that led to you pursuing a life in music.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm here, like you mentioned, I'm here at my house in the East Village in New York City. I'm actually here with my parents, who are we're sort of have a sort of rotating quarantine going on here at the ranch, we call it. Um, and Yeah, I grew up in this house in this neighborhood. Both my parents are artists, and sort of participated in the movement that was taking place when I was growing up, where artists were moving in and had sort of taken a stance and played a role in the community housing efforts that were going on in the late 70s and 80s in this neighborhood. And so that brought together a really, really um, wide cultural mix of people, and a lot of sort of community gatherings around political issues, and also and or just to get together, and to sort of see who all's in the neighborhood, share resources and things like that. um, yeah, and so it was really sort of developing into this hotbed of um, cultural activity in the city, and became, and it has, the history of that has remained, it's changed, of course, but that was a sort of golden age of that kind of activity. um, and so it's been interesting, this, of course, to see it evolve. And so a lot of the things we were fighting against, like gentrification, for example, sort of a lot of those things sort of took over, but we're still here, and a lot of the same community members are still here and sort of keeping it honest. So
And if I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
we'll be hearing a little bit about how the Lower East Side in particular may have worked its way into some of your music just a little bit
sure.
later on.
That's right.
I w-
Yeah.
Even though we obviously won't be performing the new commissioned work this weekend, I did want to give our audience a chance to experience some of your other music. Some Cincinnatians may remember hearing a piece of yours called Starburst at our Classical Roots program performed by the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra just last year. And I believe today you've selected a piece from your past composition output called Banner, which was written about
That's right.
5 years ago, but I understand it has a much longer history, actually.
Sure. Yes. Well, so Banner was commissioned by the Sphinx organization, which I'll just mention in briefly. The Sphinx organization is an incredible institution that's been around for about 20 almost 25 years now, 23 years. And their mission is to promote the careers of Black and Latino string players specifically, although their network includes musicians of all kinds, singers, wind players, even other performing artists, actors, and dancers, and that includes sort of the wider network of Sphinx. And this year, I was actually one of their medalists this year, which was an incredible honor. And so I've had a very long relationship with the organization, and so they were responsible for this really was a really significant commission to commission Banner in 2014, because it was meant to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Star Spangled Banner, which was an interesting challenge for me, because I had a sort of complicated relationship with the history of that song, as was revealed widely a few years ago. There are stanzas in that song that have racist sentiments that were eventually sort of cut out from the version that we all sing at sporting events and such. So it's a complicated reference to the idea of freedom. So I took that complication, that sort of mixed relationship, and sort of created a piece that I felt was reflective of a wider scope of cultural relationships to that word freedom, or that feeling of freedom. the ideal of freedom that we all sort of try to live by here as best we can. And so I included a variety of songs from neighboring countries, sort of national songs, and also some anti-war and and sort of socialist anthems from Puerto Rico, for example, and some sort of American folk anti-war songs and things like that that are sort of all mixed together in this piece. The section of Banner that I think we're gonna play for you now is a section where I've juxtaposed the Black national anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," with a sort of a rendition of the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a you'll hear it hopefully if you can capture it in your viewing at home. There's an underpinning of a sort of chorale of a musical interpretation of the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you listen very closely underneath it, there'll be a refrain that sounds something like da 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 da. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, right? And so on and so on and so on. And it goes on underneath a sort of a very sort of vulnerable performance of "Lift Every Voice and Sing" on the bass, on the upright bass. I thought it was maybe an interesting idea to have the bass, which is often left out of the solo choices in an orchestra setting. I thought this was an interesting way to frame that song as something that's sort of trying to get out from behind the orchestra. So we'll hear just a clip of that that section of the piece.
Let's go now to Banner. I believe we're starting just a few minutes in. We're going to hear about 5 minutes from a recording by the Catalyst Quartet, some other string players, and led by the conductor Julian Wachner. This is Banner. You obviously see this cultural artifact, the Star Spangled Banner, as something that's worthy of examination and reconsideration. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, when I was like with like as it goes with any commission, where where there's a sort of an idea in place and a sort of message that's being delivered. I have to sort of find my, spend some time finding my way to like what my personal um, interpretation is of that message. And so as I was sort of researching and learning more about the history of the anthem, um, I was I had stumbled across a long speech by Frederick Douglass, wherein and it was a July 4th celebration, wherein he was trying to, he was examining in the speech um, the issue that the America isn't free until Black people are free, and how do Black people identify with this idea of July 4th and this idea of freedom and independence, and that's something that we as people need to challenge. And he was saying this, 150 years ago. About 150 years ago. My mom's here. I'm fact checking with her. She's giving me the nod of the head. Make sure I have my dates right. um, I was, in examining a song that we're taught is that we're supposed to honor in light of this idea. I thought, well, my best way I know to honor this is to also research and try to find other ways in which other societies examine their own ideals of freedom, and those cultures are all represented here in this country. So how do those cross mingling ideas of freedom and liberation, how do they intersect? What do they sound like when you put them all together? And that concept was, very much a 2020 and 21st century concept as we sort of move into this new awareness. We're starting to be a little bit more, thank goodness, aware of our the power of the diversity in our country. Hopefully, in looking at it in a positive light, moving forward. And so I sort of like took that as a way to jump off, and so that we're not, so that we're able to look at at the mixing pot as one sort of cohesive value that has its own contradictions, so. And also, it was a really fun way to learn lots of different new music and new traditional songs that I hadn't known before.
I would encourage everyone to listen to the full track, because in addition to the beautiful plangent section that we just heard, there are moments of extraordinary rhythmic energy and vitality as well. This, however, gives us a great opportunity to shift to a more recent piece of yours. I think just last year, actually, an album was released by the Chicago Sinfonietta under their conductor Man Chen called Project W, works by diverse women composers. In addition to your music, there's also music of Florence Price, Rena Ismail, Clarissa Saad, who's a friend of the May Festival, and I believe Jennifer Higdon as well. Certainly diverse, not only in background, but also in style and compositional approach. What was it like to work on this project, to be featured along such interesting, diverse voices?
Well, it was just, it's so interesting I just thought it was such a wonderful idea to bring all of these, like you said, such different style composers together. I thought that was a really interesting choice, because it does, again, show just how many different points of view there are in music, not just in terms of people's political considerations around music, but their just sense of style and experience. And I think, sort of a young buck I feel like I was among greats, being a part of this project. So this is really exciting to me to be among such good company. It was really involved in experience. When I went to Chicago, we had meetings with some of the young performers. It was a really sort of integrated experience where we got to meet a lot of the fellow performers and the fellows that they have, the conducting fellows that are there, and meeting with full staff and sort of just getting a real sense of the organization. Chicago Sinfonieta's history is so interesting, and so I just really thought that they brought a lot of their values forward through this project. So that was a real, and then going into the recording studio, we did the premiere one evening. And then maybe 2 or 3 days later, we went into the recording studio. So that was like a fast-paced turnaround. It was really, really an exciting process. Yeah.
And the work you wrote for that recording, Coincident Dances, is in some ways, this seems to be at least a very exciting, interesting urban soundscape in a sense. The listener has a sense of traveling through something and encountering all of these different kind of musics that perhaps were already going on, but we're only now becoming conscious of them. Is that at least near the concept you had in mind?
Very near, very near. You nailed it. Yeah. I was sort of playing with this idea of, walking down a city street and hearing all of the different types of music. A lot of the times it's dance music. It's like somebody's music pumping out of their car. And dance music in itself is something that's so celebratory and communal. So there was something about that aspect of celebration that's part of it too. So I sort of fused together. I transcribed some melodies, actually similar in process to a piece like Banner, where I transcribed a lot of different melodies and sort of made up like a trance music background track, like riff that I'm not sure. I don't know if it's in this clip, but it's at some point in the piece, or sort of toward the end and partway toward the front too. Sort of have these dance styles sort of intermingling with each other, and I sort of tried this idea of sort of trying to find the common denominator between them. And I think that in the excerpt that we'll hear, I call this piece a kitchen sink piece because I threw a bunch of stuff in, plus the kitchen sink, into this one. I think the part you're going to hear, there's a samba kind of thing happening in 7 with a like very clear waltz happening in the horns, and sort of why and how do they intersect? And it's just it's meant to be fun, a fun sort of exploration of this idea of multiple dance tracks.
Let's hear this very exciting excerpt then from Coincident Dances, the Chicago Sinfonietta, and Mei-An Chen. Coincident dances, indeed.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about the Lower East Side, which is not only your neighborhood, but has also been an artistic muse for you, perhaps we might say. So much so that you wrote a piece about it for mezzo-soprano and cello called Lois. Tell us a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, so the piece, it's called Lois, I Love You, which is, Lois is like like a broken Spanish way of saying Lower East Side. And that was coined for people that live in this neighborhood or anyone that's ever visited Alphabet City in New York. When you go, there's avenues, Alphabet City, Avenue A, B, Avenue C was named Loisaida Avenue by a poet named Bimbo Rivas. And Bimbo wrote this poem called Loisaida, I Love You. Bimbo was like, he was sort of like the prince of the East Village. I mean, he was a big leader of the movement that sort of helped get the torn down buildings turned into co-ops so that people could, families that needed housing could have a place to live. In fact, the building that we live in currently is sort of one of these houses among many in the neighborhood that were turned over by artists. And that he led the charge with the city to let us use these buildings and own these buildings and refurbish them and live in them. And so we have him to thank for having all of these great housing opportunities in this neighborhood. And so just, he was a symbol like many others around that time, and who were representing this figure of the artist as a citizen and as a leader, as a community leader. And he really lived that, and so he had a great love for this neighborhood. And so this song is an ode to the Lower East Side and a love song to the Lower East Side. It says, despite all of the crime and all of the things that are people bumping up against each other, there's a great love, and there's a history here, and that we want to preserve, and I love the people here. So
beautiful. Let's hear just a portion of Loisaida in a beautiful performance from the mezzo-soprano of Jennifer Johnson Cano and cellist Kivi Khan Lipman. Jessie, the music we've heard of yours so far tonight has these very prominent features of an interest in history and American cultural artifacts, an interest in confluences of circumstance and of culture, and also an interest in activism. And I'm so glad you chose these because all of those features converge in the piece that you wrote for the May Festival and the Cathedral Choral Society. And to help me talk about that, I'd like to welcome our other guest for this evening, who is no stranger to Cincinnati himself. Christopher Eanes is the executive director of the Cathedral Choral Society in Washington, D.C., and we're so excited to welcome him into our conversation. Chris, how are you?
Good. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Jesse. It's nice to see the inside of Music Hall once again, even from afar.
Chris, many of our viewers will remember you as the previous director of the Cincinnati Boy Choir and of Collegium Cincinnati, but you're now in Washington, D.C. in your new position. For those of us who aren't familiar, tell us a little bit about who the Cathedral Choral Society is and what you're up to.
Sure. The Cathedral Choral Society is the symphonic chorus in residence at Washington National Cathedral. It was founded in 1942, about 6 days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, and has been really an important musical staple, an artistic staple in our nation's capital since that time. I took over just about 10 months ago as the executive director of the organization, and it's been an interesting year, to say the least. But one in which we are all spending some time to reevaluate our mission and the way that we engage people in music. And I think, when we all come through this, we're going to see just how important the arts and making music together really is for our communities.
I second that. Let's talk about the concert in March that almost happened for the Cathedral Choral Society. What was the subject of that concert, and how did that come to be?
The concert that we were just days away from presenting in March was called March of the Women. The genesis of the project was interesting. The Cathedral Choral Society was doing a search for their new music director just a couple of years ago. To put it in context, just the third music director in a nearly 80-year history, which is pretty amazing. And their candidate, now music director Maestro Stephen Fox, was asked if he would prepare a sample program to celebrate the centenary of the 19th Amendment, or of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And the program he came up with was so exciting that once he got the job, he said, well, we have to do this. And everybody agreed. So I came on board after that ball was already rolling. The program itself was based around two ideas. One, that of course, all of the music on the program would be by women. And two, that there would be new pieces by women composers on there. And so three composers, Jessie included, were engaged to write major pieces of music for that concert and really form the centerpiece of the music. There's another composer on there, I should say. The reference to the title is to a piece by Dame Ethel Smythe, who's a British composer who lived about 100 years ago. She was not only a suffragist, but she was the first woman to have a work performed by the Metropolitan Opera. And it was over 100 years until the next piece by a woman was performed there. So we all know that there's a tremendous amount of work to do to represent women's voices in the field of composition. But she wrote this piece, which is literally a march, and called it March of the Women for all the suffragists out there. So we were going to close the program with that.
Jessie, when you heard about this project and received the commission prompt, how did you respond to it, and how did that lead you to the piece that ended up in Washington and in Cincinnati?
Well, similarly sort of to Banner, I knew, with this sort of like historical event or moment that was being commemorated, I knew that this was an opportunity to do some research and find out more about that moment. And so among the first things that I came up with was the idea to feature some aspect of the speeches that were made during the very first U.S. Women's National Convention in 1850. And so, which would have been, the start of this sort of public acknowledgement of women as leaders, potential leaders, and people that have a voice in our society. So I thought, why don't I go back to that moment and then see what sort of draws out from there. Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen the score, which I guess is everyone, the piece,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, the piece in its libretto imagines an interaction between Sojourner Truth and the Time Person of the Year from last year, I believe, the climate activist Greta Thunberg, which is quite an extraordinary juxtaposition. And I'm hoping you, or perhaps the author of that text, could
Yes.
talk about how
Yeah.
those two people came to live inside the space of this piece.
Sure. So first, I'll say we are expecting the special guest, which is the author, who happens to be my mother. She's gonna slowly make her way to sit next to me, so that any questions that come up about text, maybe she can help me answer. But the idea that I came up with this idea to, yeah, I came up with this idea to, Greta Thunberg. I like the idea of setting a political statement to music. Like, we were talking about text. I wanted to be able to use a political speech. This is my mother, Robbie McCauley.
Hello, very
Hello,
warm
Greta.
welcome to you.
Hello.
Warm welcome to you. Here, I'm going to set her up, hook her up with the tech.
Okay, I got it.
Okay. Where are you? Okay. So I had this idea. I wanted to have the voice of a young person, because I thought that was really important to represent the future moving forward, and then to have somebody who represents the past and that moment of, that important moment of the National Women's Convention. I thought the story around Sojourner Truth was really interesting in that the speech that she gave at that National Women's Convention has been sort of romanticized, and in a way, and it's called "Ain't I a Woman," which is a very well-known speech of hers, which is actually sort of a dramatized. Thank you. Dramatized version of what she actually said. There's two versions, and there's one version that she actually approved printing of, and then the one that we know, which is a little bit more poetic. And so I took her original statements and set those within the text, and sort of juxtaposed that with Greta Thunberg's speech that she gave at the climate summit in 2018. But my mom, being the expert wordsmith that she is, we wanted to make sure we didn't run into any issues of rights and things like that. So she sort of in the same way that Sojourner Truth's speech was poeticized. We sort of did that with Greta's speech, and sort of made it into this larger poem between that imagines this, like a court meeting between the two of them, with them both being subjects of being leaders in the courtroom, and sort of stating their case.
I think we have
to the
some of the
public.
text. I think we have a slide of the text here, actually, that we can show to the audience
Sure.
while you're talking about it, which would be great. Tell us a little bit more about the idea of a court, because actually that is a prominent feature of the piece, particularly at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah. So I thought I would, the court was, it's a public gathering where people have an opportunity to make a case for themselves and their cause. And I thought that was, it's something that we're all familiar with. And I thought that, and I sort of just imagined the first National Women's Convention being like this rowdy kind of courtroom scene for some reason. I totally made that up in my head, but I sort of took that idea and created a sort of sonic representation of a courtroom. So this was something I was really well, in the future, we'll work on it together with the orchestra, but just there's a lot of sort of free form improvisation that goes on with the orchestra to sort of mimic sounds of rustling feet and rustling papers and gavels and all kinds of, kerfuffling and chatting and things like that. And the typewriter and etc. So there's that whole piece at the beginning of the piece to sort of set the scene. But maybe, Mom, if you want to talk a little about how you were asking about how the sort of text was sort of gridded together.
Yes.
One of the ways that I write, and it's similar to the way Jessie describes listening and actually reading and reinterpreting texts around the themes that I'm interested in, and the idea of using Sojourner truth, and then finding that information of how her speech had been poeticized again. But I went back to I have something to say, which is what she really said, and also having Greta Thunberg say the same thing. I have something to say. So it shows those two different generations of women opening a space for women to have something to say about vital topics.
And also, I'll just mention, Jessie, the prominent inclusion of the voices of young people as well. The work calls for chorus, orchestra, and a chorus of young people. Chris, I believe this was slated to be some choristers from the National Cathedral, is that correct?
Yeah, we were actually going to use a combined chorus, some from the National Cathedral, some from the Maryland State Boy Choir. We had a nice group of kids put together, and that was one of the pieces we were really looking forward to. Is if you don't mind my adding, what was so interesting to us that came out of all the pieces that were commissioned was, I think one could have imagined that in celebrating the 19th Amendment, when some women were granted the right to vote, it would have been a piece that looked backwards. And instead, the pieces were all very forward-looking and very much about the future and what's next. And I think that speaks a lot to the amount of work that is left to do to represent all people, not just women moving forward. So it's really, really, a tremendous project.
We have the opportunity now, I think, to take a few questions from the audience who've been submitting questions through our chat function. And actually, a question for you, Chris. Mary is asking, I believe the world premiere of this piece was going to happen in March in Washington, D.C. Were either of you able to go to any of the rehearsals before that work had stopped? And if so, what reactions do you have?
Well, I was, of course, able to go to rehearsals, and in fact, we were just days before we got together with the orchestra to make it happen. So it was really sad and unfortunate timing, and the chorus was really excited to get this piece going, and I know when we pick it up again, they'll be excited for that.
Yeah, I was unfortunately not able to get to that rehearsal. It's always a good idea not to have the composer in the room before everyone has had a chance to run through it a couple times on their own. So by that point, they had just, like Chris mentioned, they had only just gotten the orchestra with the chorus, and so I wasn't slated to be there till the end of that week. Yeah. So,
but Chris, I believe you have plans to perform the piece in the future?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to do the whole program. It's too important a program not to. In addition to the fact that the chorus and the conductor and all the soloists just love the piece, it's a significant voice that needs to be heard, and we don't know when it will be, but we're going to do it as soon as we can.
Excellent. I also know it is the intention of Juan Jimena to conduct the piece at the 2021 May Festival, so we will look forward to that as well. A question from Doug. Jessie, your instrumental writing is so organic. how did you become comfortable with the voices of various instruments, particularly that of the cello, since you are, I believe, a violinist?
Oh, I love that question. So yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I love the cello. Cello is like one of my favorite instruments. I um, sort of think I had picked the violin when I was 4. What did I know? I really do love the cello very much. And so, and I've played a lot of music with cellists. Really the way that I sort of relate to instruments that I don't play is in my experience playing with those instrumentalists, whether it be in chamber music or orchestra and I sort of use my imagination a lot of the time just to sort of it seems a little silly, but I like to sort of picture the player in my mind, sort of how, like, the gestures that I associate with that instrument, the physical gestures that I sort of remember and recall from those experiences help me sort of, you said something, the question mentioned gesture. And so, yeah, that's sort of where I think I just sort of store those experiences in the back of my mind and use that as a guide. And if I have specific technical issues and questions, I always reach out to a friend and say, hey, I had this idea. It seemed natural to me, but why don't you play it and tell me if I'm off the mark or not, so.
We all get by with a little help from our friends.
Correct.
Stephen asks, if Jessie wasn't commissioned to write with a specific topic in mind, what topic would you choose?
Aha. Ooh, I love that question. I don't always necessarily pick a topic when I write. Sometimes there's an obvious topic, but I think for a piece, for this kind of an opportunity, for an orchestra of this size, with a choir plus orchestra, I think I still probably would have chosen to write a piece with children's choir as well. We were talking yesterday, I was talking about my experience as I love singing too. I sang when I was a kid. I sang in a chorus for a long time, the Young People's Chorus of New York. And I was really serious about it. I had to choose between singing and violin at one point. It was a very serious moment in my childhood musical career. And so I would have definitely incorporated children's voices. And then once you include children's voices, I think then that sort of guides maybe some of the direction of what kinds of text you might use. And I sort of probably would have started just from this concept of like, who's in the room, and then go from there on deciding, what topic. I don't know. It's a little hard to say right now what I would have written about because it's now everything's sort of time flipped, but probably something bright, probably something celebratory and sort of in the vein of like maybe looking forward to something joyous, thinking about youth.
You did a piece for the children's chorus too.
Yes, I did. I wrote a piece for Young People's Chorus a couple of years ago. So that relationship was cyclical.
Fantastic.
Luckily, yeah.
Chris, a question for you from Alan. What kind of programming are you considering for the future? We can maybe dovetail that with a question from Edie. What are your thoughts on the changes that are coming for live performances and for compositions coming forward? You can both answer that. Chris, how about you first?
Well, this is the $1 million question right now, isn't it? Because, for the time being, we're being instructed that we can't gather in large groups and that, particularly with choral music, that might be on the back burner for a while. And so we're all trying to find ways to engage not just our singers, but the communities that follow what we do. And so I can tell you, we know what a season would look like if we were open for business, and it would look, hopefully to most people engaging and exciting and have a great combination of new works and war horses, as they call them, that people love. But right now we're thinking a lot about alternatives to that. How might we put together performances that are engaging, that people can stream from their homes? and what does the future look like? I'll tell you one thing. If we had done this concert a couple months ago, we would have announced alongside it that this project has been so inspiring for the staff of the Cathedral Choral Society that we were actually ready to just don't tell anybody about this for all of you watching. We're actually about to launch an initiative to foster the voices of female composers and really dive into that over the next several years and make that a core part of what we do. And we still intend to do that. We're just having to pivot a little bit on how we do it.
Fantastic. Well, we will certainly keep our eyes open for the fruits of those labors. Jessie, as you look ahead to compositions you might be working on right now or commissions that you intend to take up in the near future, how are the possible restrictions on performances bearing on those creative decisions?
Well, like Chris is mentioning, I mean, there's a lot of things still up in the air, and there's some different organizations are interpreting this in different ways. I, at the moment, have not planned to readapt any works for different instrumentation, for example, reducing, although, because, I mean, and I only say that because nothing official has been presented yet in that way, but I do imagine that'll play into some programming decisions that take place in the next season, which I'm prepared to be flexible with, of course. I mean, we'll all have to sort of make it work. And music, luckily there's a lot of options in terms of instrumentation. There are a lot of different ways that you can express whatever it is you're trying to express. So I look forward to to troubleshooting all of that.
Another question for you, Jessie. Doug is asking, who are your favorite poets besides your parents?
What's funny is I'm not really that into poetry. It just so happened. Oh gosh, now I'm gonna being put on the spot. Okay, well, I'm gonna this is a popular answer, but I love Pablo Neruda. All Spanish writers to me are just glorious anyway, but his poetry is just magical. The Book of Questions, that was the first one of his I read, which I think is the last book of poetry he wrote. And I just love that one because it just keeps you thinking, it's speaking of going forward and going back, I feel like it expresses this sentiment of like being able to question what's coming while also simultaneously reflecting. And so that comes to mind. Yeah.
With a literary expert in the room, I'll take the chance to ask you, Robbie, who are some of your favorite poets, and what do you think we should all be reading right now?
Well, I think I gave Jessie the Book of Questions, so Neruda.
No, I bought it at the Strand.
Oh, okay. Well, I bought it for a few people. Anyways, we share that one, Neruda. But I'm quite traditional in my taste in poetry. Maya Angelou is a favorite poet of mine, and I would recommend any of her works.
Fantastic.
She's so grounded in American culture.
Beautiful. Lauren asks, Jessie, what's your favorite Broadway show?
Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness. Now you're exposing my lack of knowing Broadway. My favorite Broadway show. Gosh. Well, I'll tell you this. I went to see Oklahoma recently, which I had a lot of friends in, the new version of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really fascinating piece of art. Because the way that they redid it was in this sort of, really pared down space where the actors are right up close with the audience, and it's a sort of small theater. And I had never really experienced Broadway shows in that a Broadway show in that way, that was so intimate, and that also used multimedia. There was like a video projection that happened as part of the performance, which was really sort of brought it into this contemporary space. So I thought
And
that was a really engaging, yeah.
didn't they feed you as well?
Correct. And then there was, in the middle of the show, they served vegetarian chili and cornbread that was so delicious. I can taste it right now. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So they got me with the chili. No, the show was good too. Yeah.
Perhaps that's the future of performing arts we should all be considering.
It's also the past.
Yeah.
I fed people in my performance pieces.
Yes.
Really?
Years ago. So, yes, in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask you to tell me more about that.
Well, I just felt like we were there for a long period of time, and that food was a way to connect to people as well as through language and ideas.
What did you
And
serve?
so I would make cookies and apples and pass apples and cookies around. Homemade
fantastic.
oatmeal cookies.
Homemade oatmeal cookies, yeah.
You made them yourself?
Yes, that was part of the performance.
Wow.
In preparation. I was much more energetic back then.
I think we have time for one more question here. And it's a big one from Alan again. Jessie, is there a particular subject or topic that's interesting to you that you would like to include in a future work of yours?
Yeah, as far as topics, I mean, the really thing that I'm really interested in is sort of is a little bit the concept that I was working with coincident dances, and sort of working that out a little bit further. This idea of seemingly juxtaposing styles or cultural musical styles, and finding sort of where they intersect. And I'm sort of like interested in finding, correlating rhythms across, sort of like a linguist looks for, roots and meanings that traverse different languages and the sort of lineage of those. I'm really interested in those connections in music, and then finding a sort of way to integrate those discoveries into pieces that I'm writing. So I guess that's more of a stylistic consideration rather than topic, but I also think it addresses this idea that how interconnected we are through culturally and just historically. So.
Well, we'll certainly keep our eyes and ears out for works that address those issues in the future. And I'd encourage everyone to follow the Cathedral Choral Society and the Cincinnati May Festival so that you can be the first to hear about upcoming performances of I Have Something to Say, which we're both very eager to bring to the stage. We're coming up on 8 p.m., so I'd like to thank you, Jessie, and Chris, and you, Robbie, our special surprise guest. And thank you, to all of those who are viewing us from home. We hope you'll join us this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. here for Music Hall as Rachel Roberts from the Yoga Bar leads a special live yoga session from the Wilkes Studio, which is our next live May Festival event, featuring also a guest performance by Sarah Folsom, co-founder of the Queen City Cabaret. For more information and for the full schedule of live events, visit mayfestival.com. On behalf of our guests tonight, I'm Matthew Swanson from Music Hall in Cincinnati. Keep singing.